Hey, good morning. We're going to do lecture A this week for chapter 23, the United States and the Cold War. I'll get the PowerPoint up here before too long so you can follow along when you're listening to the notes. Chapter 23 reaction quiz is up. There will be a reaction quiz this week. And then Friday will be chapter quiz like normal. We're obviously already down today with the no school yesterday for all of us. Big thing to remind you, make sure you're staying on top of your quizzes. I gave you guys a little bit of time to get caught up. I'm going to start deducting for being late. We have no reason to be late now with the quizzes and stuff. You got over a week to do most of them. Please stay on top of it all. I don't want to have to be going back and forth trying to get caught up on grading and stuff. Side note for your test, it was originally scheduled for Friday. I've pushed it back till next Wednesday. Yeah, we're already at a test, but we've missed so much school off and on. It's really snuck up on us. Our midterm is going to be next Wednesday, the middle of the week, which is fitting. I'm probably going to make the test a two-parter. Part of it will be online. You'll be able to take the multiple choice online like you do. It'll still be closed book, but you'll be able to do that portion. Click, be able to submit right then and there. And then the written portion will probably have you type this time around. You'll be typing instead of writing. That way I could read your handwriting a little bit better. Some of your handwriting's, hard to read. That being said, those are some things to look forward to. So, reaction quiz is already up. Quiz will be Friday. I'll put a study. I think the study guide already is up. If not, I'll put it up here shortly for Chapter 23. Test for the next test, midterm test is next Wednesday. Okay, some focus questions. What series of events and ideological conflicts prompted the Cold War? How did the Cold War reshape the ideas of American freedom? And really, you can look at it domestically and abroad. What major domestic policy initiatives did Truman undertake? And what effects did the anti-communism of the Cold War have on American politics and culture? Okay, origins of the Cold War 1. Post World War II, two powers emerge in the world. And those are really summed up in the United States and the Soviet Union. The British, by this point, had really fallen off. After World War II, the British are going to lose large chunks of their empire. India specifically comes to mind. And then you're going to have autonomy of other countries, much more controlling of their own futures after this point. And plus, the British were broke. United States emerged from World War II as by far the world's greatest superpower, primarily because we had not been affected domestically by the war, and secondly, the easiest, which is technologically with the atom bomb or atomic bomb. Security we viewed depending on security of Europe and Asia, hence why from 1945 to today we have taken an active role in European and Asian conflicts. And like I said, we possessed the bomb. Soviet Union occupied much of Eastern Europe and helped defeat the Nazis. They are really the critical element to help defeat the Nazis. I will give them where credit's due. They are not the sole reason the Nazis fall, but they should get a big share of the lion's share on that, or credit. They wanted to create a sphere of influence. Germany had invaded twice in 30 years, and Stalin did not want any more German incursions into the Soviet Union. The sphere of influence is basically, think of it more as a buffer zone. Dalton, between our houses, we have my fence, and then we have those trees, right? So we have a buffer zone between our houses. Not that we need one. I wish there was other areas I had a better buffer zone. I won't name areas, and you know what I'm alluding to. But there's that buffer zone, right? So if my dog or if my daughter threw something over the fence, it would not land in your yard, would it? Unless she had a really good arm. It was a good arm. But the point of it is, it protects our properties, right? When I lived in Maryville, I had a shared driveway with my neighbor. I literally could throw something out my window and hit the house. Like, not even far, right? It was right there, close proximity. So, in our driveway was shared, so anything that happened in the driveway affected both of us, right? Guess who shoveled the whole driveway? There was an old lady that used to live there, and she wasn't shoveling any snow. She'd just stare out the window and gawk at me, which was awkward. But that being said, Stalin did not want to take any chances with Germany. So what's he going to do? He's going to create a buffer zone between Germany and the Soviet Union. Origins of the Cold War II. So roots of containment. As soon as peace was declared, everything started to unravel. So World War II ends. Remember, we go back to, I think it was before Potsdam. What was it? The Tehran Conference, the one where they met in Tehran, Iran. Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt all agreed that Germany would be split up. Specifically, FDR and Stalin said, we're going to split Germany into two halves, right? We're not there yet, but your context clues. And we talked about this in my American history class. We talked about this before. Soviets were slow to withdraw from Iran. Iran today is obviously a problematic country, needless to say. They have oil. They had oil back then too. Soviet Union was supposed to leave Iran. They were slow to leave. Obviously, they wanted the oil. Soviet Union then established their pro-governments in Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. Yeah, the Soviets are pulling back, but what are they doing? They are purposely making sure the elections go their way. Poland's the first big example, followed by Romania and Bulgaria. These countries, if you look on a map, border modern Russia today. Well, actually, somewhat, or the old Soviet Union, right? So Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria are basically making a wall of the old Soviet Union. They're not done there yet either, by the way. The long telegram. 1946, George Kennan sent a message, and this is why it's called a long telegram. It's a long message to Truman from Europe. He stated, the Soviets could not be dealt with as a normal government. They had to expand communism and their mindset. Going back to the 20s, Stalin had already arranged what was called the Comintern, which is basically spreading communism around the world. They believed that they were at war with capitalism, and that socialism, or communism is often referred to, which is not the correct connotation, needed to expand. So what are they going to naturally do around the world? Try to seed socialist governments, make them communist. Shortly thereafter, Winston Churchill, who's no longer in power, travels to all places, Fulton, Missouri. Yeah, Winston Churchill, the former British Prime Minister, he also becomes Prime Minister again later in his older age, travels to Fulton, Missouri. Why would he come to Missouri? What's his connection to Missouri? What's that?
Family?
Nope.
Truman was from here.
Truman. He was invited as a personal friend of Truman to Missouri, and he happened to, I think he gave a speech specifically at Fulton. I don't know if it was a graduation speech or just a speech in general. And that's where he gave his very famous Iron Curtain speech, that an Iron Curtain has descended upon Eastern Europe. What he's referring to is Poland, Romania, and Bulgaria. These countries are becoming, they're supposed to have free elections, right? Stalin says, yeah, free elections. Yeah, the free elections is BS, right? They're staging these elections. They're influencing people to create these governments. Thus, born out of this, and it's kind of, I have to look through my notes. I think we'll get to it. Yeah, it's on the next slide. We have this policy called the Truman Doctrine. It's kind of cool that one of the most important presidents of the 20th century is from Missouri. And I honestly think he's one of the better presidents we've ever had. Not just because he's from Missouri, but because he had no experience, made a lot of common sense decisions. Sometimes people that have quote-unquote experience make some pretty stupid decisions. That being said, he comes up with the Truman Doctrine, which is policy of containment. Stop the spread of communism around the world and promote freedom, or democracy specifically. The ironic thing, and you've heard me allude to this, is the United States a democracy? What are we? We're a republic, right? There's fancy words as democratic republic and all that. We are a republic in and out. Do we vote on most everything every single day? No. How often do we vote on something as a people? Very rarely. At the state level, do we ever vote on anything federal except representatives?
Like We only vote like twice a year or something.
On representatives, right?
Yeah.
That represent us.
Or on the bills, like some, like.
The only time we vote on
they're
bills is
down.
where? The state or local level, not at the federal level.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. We have elements of a democracy, but we are a republic. Anyway, I got off my soapbox. Sorry. I just hate when even today politicians are using the word democracy, communism, socialism, democratic socialism, and it makes me cringe. There's no such thing as a democratic socialism. It's not a viable thing, just so you say it. Socialism at the heart, who controls everything? The government. We'll get to that later, but sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. Sorry if you like democratic socialism. As a historian, most good historians cringe when people use that because they just don't know history. And by the way, no democracy has ever lasted very long. That's why it's a good thing we're not a pure democracy. The Truman Doctrine. In 1947, Great Britain informed the United States they had to pull out of Greece. Greece had been stabilized by the British for a long period, but now the British they're broke, right? World War II basically ended the British Empire. Greek monarchy was facing a communist rebellion backed by guess who? The Soviets. Yes.
I just have a question.
I got an answer.
A democracy is majority vote, isn't it?
It's ruled by the people.
Yeah, so majority vote then.
Exactly. Majority is by one vote.
Right.
That's a true democracy.
Which, yeah. I just had that question.
People would not like a true democracy if they got it.
That's true.
We are not a true democracy, and that's why the Electoral College is actually very, very important, and people often don't understand that whole process. Because if we were a simple majority, the minority would always be shattered by a few states. That's the reality. That's not the way the Constitution was set up. Each state is supposed to be the same par of each state. Anyway, good question.
That was just a question.
The Greek monarchy is basically, I wouldn't say it's a great system that they have going on there, kind of bad. But the Soviet Union is trying to get Greece to go communist. Why? Because they control the straits of the Black Sea. The Black Sea is a huge body of water here in between Europe and Asia, right? They control Greece, they control that whole way, those straits right there, and they can greatly degrade the power of the United States in that area, and they can make another buffer zone, and they can extend its influence. Senate leader Arthur Vandenberg told Truman the only way he could get support was to scare the hell out of the American people. Well, is that accurate? Are you going to get Americans to buy in? We're going to do this because we feel good and it's the right thing to do. Or it's the end of the world as we know it.
You gotta be aggressive.
You got to be aggressive. Now, there is some truth to scaring the hell out by the Truman. We now look back retrospectively on the Soviet Union. Was it a bad government? Oh, hell yeah. Sorry for cursing, but yeah, it was bad. My next debate topics, I was just going through it for my American history class. I put on there as one of the wild cards, is Stalin worse than Hitler?
Yeah.
And we'll just ask about that right now. Why we just finished World War II. Credited to Hitler's death count. 6 to 7 million in the Holocaust,
Stalin had more.
plus, well, actually about 11 million in the Holocaust, 6 billion are Jews, 5 billion in other diversities, plus, we'll say, 5 to 10 million casualties in Europe. We'll say 15 to 20 million conservatively for Hitler.
Stalin had 50, didn't he?
Well, we can prove without too much reasonable doubt that Stalin killed at least 10 to 15 million of his own people. That's a low ball. Most estimates average 20 to 50 million.
Yeah.
There is some that believe it could be as high as 60 million because he was in power from 23 to 53.
Well, haven't you seen the charts? Like on the graded, like the most kill counts or whatever between leaders? It's like Mao is first and then Stalin second.
And to put it in perspective, and even in World War II, and this is not even on Hitler, the Red Army, the Soviet army, is pushed back by the Nazis, right? So we'll take an example here. You four are Soviet leaders in the army. You're all generals. Zach, your army holds strong. They don't retreat. Yay, high five. You do it for the country. Your guys are obliterated. Dalton, your guys are running into the woods. All three of you are executed. New generals are promoted. Is that Hitler's causing that, or is that Stalin killing his own generals? It's Stalin, isn't it? Now, you can make the argument Hitler is being the aggressor, but Hitler's not actively killing the generals, is it? And I've alluded to, did I talk about Stalingrad the other day, what Hitler or Stalin did to motivate his troops? Or actually the generals did? They literally took his voice, beamed it behind them as they're fighting. Do it for the fatherland, do it for Russia, do it for the Soviet Union. Or if you retreat, you'll face consequences, which was?
Death.
So they're either going to die at the hands of the Germans or die because they retreated. Fear is a very powerful motivator, right? So they're going to fight extra harder. They're going to go to the tooth and nail. Because they don't want to go back home to Stalin's wrath. Two madmen going at it. Not a good situation. But the point of this is, scaring the hell out of the American people is not necessarily wrong in this context. I will argue Truman was taking the right course. Because could you imagine a world filled of countries such as the Soviet Union to this day?
Nope.
Well, it was...
Russia's getting pretty bad though right now.
Well, Russia's a unique situation. You know who's still in power in the Russia today?
Putin.
Well, Putin is, but what is Putin a product of? Now this I know we're off topic here a little bit, but this relates back, I promise. What is Putin a product of today?
The one right before him. Who was that guy right before him?
Well, he's not a product of Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin. What was Putin's role before he was a politician? He was a mayor. He made his way up to be a mayor. But what was he before he was a mayor?
Was he in the army? No.
Well,
I don't know, honestly.
He was... Any James Bond fans in here?
He was a spy?
He was, essentially. He was a KGB agent. So if you ever watched James Bond movies, good movies by the way, especially I like Daniel Craig a lot. Bond works for MI6. He's a spy, but he's also more of an intelligence resource for the British government. By the way, the whole thing that they portray, that doesn't necessarily happen to that extent, but it is an actual organization. The equivalent in America is the CIA. The equivalent in Russia was the KGB. Putin was a KGB agent. We don't know a lot about his history in the KGB, but we know he was an agent. And he was very active. After the fall of the Soviet Union, who takes power in Russia? Boris Yeltsin becomes the freely elected president of the Russian people. But who becomes the richest people in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union? Is it the common people that rose up against the socialist dictators, or is it the old socialist oligarchy that assumed all the business responsibility? The answer is all the old communist heads. Those people that have been in power in Russia, or the old Soviet Union, they stay in power. They're the ones that buy into all the private enterprise in Russia. They are the ones that get rich. So now what are you starting to see in Russia? You're starting to see a return to the old Soviet mentality, isn't it? Why? Because guess who's now in their 60s, 70s, and 80s of all the money in the Soviet, or Russia. Sorry, Russia.
All the old dictator, or
the old
leaders,
system, right?
Yeah.
They knew they had, basically they realized that their system was going to collapse for a period. Now they're being brilliant because they're using capitalism, free market, to their advantage. Any system can be bad if misguided. Now, capitalism usually has self-correcting things, where socialism is just all directed by the government. Now, they're merging to kind of like China is right now. We could go into long hours on this. It's a geopolitical nightmare is what it is. And I can tell you a presidential candidate in 2012 that laughed at someone that said Russia was a legitimate threat. I won't name names. Said, no, Russia is not a threat. Really? Now, that same group that said Russia's not a threat is saying Russia hacked everything.
Yeah, really.
Now, the reality is, there might have been some bad stuff going on at the candidates and all that. I'm not going to get into that. The reality is, what did Russia actually try to extend? And they did this they did this here. Where's it at? The Soviet Union did it here. Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. What did they do?
They influenced them.
They influenced them, right? How do you influence someone today? Is it money can be one. What's the most powerful thing today besides money that you can influence people with?
Military? No?
Projection. So the Soviets used their military, they used money to influence, control people, right? Fear.
Yeah.
But there's a more powerful tool today that some countries are still not even grasping. And this is what the Russians used on the 2016 election. They didn't physically, they may have paid some people, but the evidence is a little murky on that. There's a more powerful tool that the Russians have adapted. They've moved away from military and all this. They still use that to their benefit.
Propaganda? And like
You're getting closer.
yellow journalism?
Specifically today we know, yes, what is yellow journalism known as today?
Fake news.
Fake news. Fake news galore. Now, is that on any one candidate you can blame that? No, Americans are gullible. They take truths and mix it with fakeness. Yeah, because what they're clever about is some of it contains truth, mixed with a little extra salty, manipulated data. Propaganda always contains some type of truth. That's what's so good about it. What I mean is how effective it is. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's a misdirection to give you get your perception, right? Soviets do all this in Eastern Europe. They will use, and then obviously social media didn't exist, but the whole thing is manipulation, right? Us as America, we see this veil, this control coming down, right? So we want to stop it. Truman rolled out the heaviest weapon in his rhetoric arsenal, the defense of freedom. And he was not wrong. Because you'd go and study Eastern European countries under Stalin and later the Soviet Union, they're not good places. You can't talk out, you have very strict jobs. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't some goodness things that happened, but you did never question authority. Like this whole police rioting we got going on today or whatever, that would have never happened. Or, hey, there's some reforms that need to happen. That would have never happened. Oh, we need equal pay. We need this. That would have never happened under the system. And people don't understand that to this day. A lot of history teachers don't teach you because it's not fun. Truman points out it was an ideological conflict. The other thing he's going to tie in, and this is where the communists and socialists get tied in here, is communists are going to be linked as anti-God. They're going to be viewed as atheists. Now, atheism has grown a lot, but at this point in America, God, religion is very, very important to our society. They're going to link that because in their system, God, it's kind of a godless system. It's all about for the people, for the government. Okay? Very regimented. Set the precedent for American assistance to anti-communism regime throughout the world. So basically, in short, Truman Doctrine, we are going to contain communism around the world. Specifically, we're going to start with Greece. And we're going to support Greece financially to stop the spread of communism. Make sense? Origins of the Cold War IV. Now, this is going to give birth to one of the most important economic recovery packages ever created in the history of the world. It's called the Marshall Plan. 2 years after the war, much of Europe was in shambles. Communist parties were on the rise. These areas were also in fear of Soviet influence because they were coming in saying, hey, let's all share everything. You know you're poor. We're going to help you out. And that's that Iron Curtain to keep getting more and more west. Secretary of State by this time, he was the Chief of Staff of the Army during World War II. Now he's Secretary of State for Truman. George C. Marshall proposed an economic bill to rebuild Europe. He gets his name after him. Basically, we're going to give loans to all these countries in Europe to help them rebuild. As long as they basically gave free elections. I think that was the big thing. If you give free elections, we'll give you money. So are these countries going to be happy to oblige? Oh, yeah. West Germany, England, France, Spain was included, Italy, all these countries in Europe that have been ravaged by the war, right? They're going to take the money, and they're going to like this influence. Hey, we get to have free elections. We can kind of pick our own path. America's helping us. Yeah, we like this option. Choice. Remember the fifth cause of World War II, or fifth freedom they were talking about, was freedom of choice. Yeah, it's one thing to have everything provided for you, but is that always a good thing to have everything provided? Because sometimes there's things that are wasted, right?
Or things you don't want.
Or things you don't need.
Well, that too.
So we offered aid to countries to help rebuild and stabilize. The irony of this whole thing is, you know what country we did offer that rejected money? The Soviet Union. We offered the money. Of course, they rejected. No. And that was a brilliant, because that put the ball back against them, right? And then any of those Eastern countries that we offered aid to was rejected, like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, East Germany. That money will be rejected. But we put it out there, and you know who knew about it and were very upset that they didn't get that aid? The people. So now Stalin has to fight an ideological battle with them, and they will fight it for 40 years. Hence why you also have the people rebel, because they know the differences in the system. But you put it out there, let the people know, you can build a stronger case for your argument here.
Is that why we were better, like, nowadays with North Korea and helping, like, those people in there more? Or at least
North Korea is an exception to everything. North Korea is one of those few places in the world that has no outside communication. We can give so much communication to North Korea and try to help them. The problem is their people are indoctrinated very, very heavily.
Brainwashed. Like,
they're essentially brainwashed. And so that level of brainwashing the Hunger Games, I've used this example a lot of times. You look at the Capitol in the Hunger Games, those people can see stuff, hear stuff, but their realities, they've been brainwashed. This is how it is, right? North Korea, like I said, is an exception. Soviet Union, they always knew about other systems. They would cut stuff off, but the reality is we could always get stuff across the Iron Curtain, right? Communication travel. North Korea is not that way.
Thought we had that big speaker thing that we put out, and it would...
Yes, but you got to remember, you got to have people that are willingly will believe it. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the difference between this and North Korea. Is you have people here that know the system differences. People in North Korea today, they don't know the difference, and they don't want to hear the difference. Now, the Reconstruction in Japan. General Douglas MacArthur was the Supreme Commander of the Pacific Army Forces. He's going to help rebuild Japan. They're going to adopt a new democratic constitution. Women got the right to vote, and only a limited self-defense force, which they have expanded their defense force over the last few years because as China has become a growing threat, they've realized Japan needs to be able to basically protect themselves. We help rebuild Japan's industrial base. This is the thing that goes very well. We rebuilt Japan from scratch. We bombed it, we nuked it, we rebuilt it. And guess what? It's one of the better stable countries in the world today. Japan. They're one of our closest allies. They're an industrial juggernaut when it comes to technology. Thank you, Sony. Thank you, Mario. Toyota. Those all are products of this post-World War II rebirth of Japan. Now, they've had economic problems, but the stability of Japan, you go to Japan, is it a clean country? Absolutely. Are they efficient? Absolutely. But now a lot of that's a product of we helped rebuild them. They get money. The Marshall Plan is extended to them in a different facet, but we help rebuild them. Did you know that Japan still has an emperor? Yeah, we left them in power after World War II because they realized the people liked their royal family in Japan. We just helped them modernize, understand some things better. There's still a royal family in Japan. The princess in Japan made news not too long ago. Why? Does anyone know what the princess in Japan did? She abdicated. The Japanese aren't allowed to marry commoners. She married a commoner, so she had to abdicate her throne or her title. Origins of the Cold War 5. Yeah, this is a juggernaut section, by the way. The Berlin blockade and NATO. As Europe is split, Berlin is in the middle of it all. Germany will be split down, not quite the middle, in two zones of occupation. Berlin is split down the middle as well. Originally, there was 4 occupation zones of Germany and Berlin: Soviet, American, French, and British. American, or the West Zone, will be merged as one under the United States. So the British and the French will all merge with the Americans to make one zone, West Germany, and then Berlin will merge into West and East Berlin. U.S., Britain, and France introduced a separate currency in the zones to prelude the creation of a new West German government. By 48-49, we realized we aren't going to be able to reunify Germany anytime soon. Stalin ordered Berlin cut off from the West. So, Berlin is a beacon of democracy, republic, freedom, in the middle of a Soviet-controlled zone, right? He's trying to kick us out of Berlin. Blockades it. There's a train track that literally runs from east to west Germany into Berlin. He cuts it off. All the roads, all the trains are cut off. So what do? We don't want to go to war. Truman does a brilliant maneuver. They order 24-hour air operations to drop food, water, aid, anything they need into Berlin. Now, Stalin can't shoot those down because he's going to start the war. He doesn't want to start the war. He's trying to either get us to pull out, or if we go to war, it's our fault, right? Now this airlift campaign undermines Stalin's power because now he looks like the bad guy. After an 11-month airlift followed bringing supplies to West Berlin, Stalin will finally order the blockade ended in May of 1949. East and West Germany will officially be born at this point. Capital of West Germany will be Bonn. Capital of East Germany will be Berlin, ironically enough. But Berlin is split in half. There's just a little bit of a barbed wire fence there separating the two, and there's control points. You talk about the Berlin Wall. We're not there yet. 1949, though, barbed wire fence goes up. You can go between East and West Germany at this point. It's a little bit of a process, and people work on both sides of the fence. Because they're technically still Germans, right? But now, you're going to have the creation of two separate countries. 1949, the unthinkable happened. The Soviet Union got the bomb. They test it, they drop it, we find out. By the way, people that say that there's no spies in the world are ignorant. The Soviets had spies all over the United States. They figured out the bomb secrets, got it, and they tested it. All through a spy network. We know that. As a fear of this now, they have the bomb. NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, will be created. A collection of Western countries, the United States being the main country. Others like France, England, will be a part of this. This is separate from the UN. NATO is basically, if someone is attacked within the NATO alliance, all countries will come to protect them. And so it's a deterrence, right? So now the Soviet Union cannot just attack one country, think we won't do anything. Now we say we will go to war. So it's a product of almost World War I mentality of you create an alliance, right? But has NATO been effective? Well, sort of. Have we avoided major conflicts? Barely. And when I say major conflicts, I'm not saying that Iraq and Afghanistan are not major conflicts. What I'm meaning by is, have we went to war with a warring country directly? No. Not like what we call peer-to-peer. Yeah, invading Iraq, that's not a peer-to-peer fight, right? Iraq was heavily subdued after the Gulf War. I'm talking like America going against the Soviet Union, America going against Russia, America going against China, America going against France. Those kind of wars have not happened again since World War II.
It almost happened.
It has almost happened.
With that Cuban...
Well, the Cuban Missile Crisis, which would have been a third party, almost brought the two most powerful countries to war.
Right.
Very, very creepily close. Growing his communist challenge. Truman has a series of bad events happen in his last couple of years. Soviets get the bomb. 1949, China goes communist. Or Maoist, as you would say, because it's not pure anything. It's his own creation. Mao Zedong emerged victorious in the long Chinese Civil War. They kick out the nationalists in China. Those nationalists flee to an island just off the coast of China. It used to be known as Formosa. Today we know it as, because of a T, Taiwan. And until 1973, that'll actually be the official government of China by the UN. That will change. Truman refused to recognize the new government, would not seat them in the United Nations. Like I said, Taiwan was the official Chinese seat until 1973 when Nixon will finally recognize the People's Republic of China. Okay, this is a good stopping point for today. We've covered a lot. We'll get to origins of the Cold War more tomorrow. There's a lot of stuff to dissect. I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible. But yeah, the growing communist challenge. Tomorrow we're going to get into something that is often forgotten, which is the Korean War. And this is a direct result of this whole process. And today we're still seeing the effects of the Korean War ultimately because it has not been resolved. Well, we'll get to that more tomorrow. Have a good day.